Hi there, this is a video on installing Dual Boot on the Lenovo Legion Go with Nobara, Linux, and Windows. But before we get started, I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page and they understand that Linux is still a work in progress on this device. There's still bugs to fix, etc. So I just want to make sure that you all understand that things are not going to be perfect, right? So for that, I created this Legion Go tricks repo on GitHub. And here it just goes over, it lists what works, what doesn't work, what has issues, known bugs, etc., etc. So I would suggest you go to this page and just read it and make sure everything sounds okay to you so you understand what's going to be happening. I will discuss things that currently, as I'm making this video, are probably important to know. So right now, due to a recent update to Steam for the Steam Deck OLED, sometimes the FPS for games gets artificially capped by Steam. Usually it's around 72 FPS. So basically, at least on the Legion Go. So basically, you can play a game, and for some games it'll be fine. But for other games, what will happen is that you'll see a 72 FPS as the cap, and that's because Steam has a bug right now. So just know that this bug currently exists. So if you see that 72 number, or weird FPS numbers, it's probably that. Also, the FPS slider isn't always accurate. So we open the quick access menu here, and we go into here. It's this FPS number, the 60 FPS. If you change it to a different number, it might not always be accurate. Also, another thing to be aware of is that the screen refresh rate, the only refresh rates that work on this device right now are 60 and 144. If you do anything else, things might break. The screen might break and you'll have to do a reboot where the screen will get all fuzzy and you won't be able to see anything. So just know for the refresh rate, for this device, basically, you should not touch that refresh rate slider unless you want to experiment around. And then besides that, the battery indicator doesn't always work the way you'd expect it to. So right now it's actually showing a number saying 77%, but sometimes it doesn't show this number at all. And that is a little concerning. But to get around that, we can set up this first performance overlay to show the actual percentage at all times. So you just have it sit in the top left here. You can see it in the top left, the 77%, and this will always work. So in this tutorial, we're going to configure this workaround for when this indicator is being buggy. It's a Steam bug, unfortunately. We can't do anything about it. But besides that, I'll just read through here and see, if everything else looks good to you. Like suspend resume works and is very stable. What's it called? The controllers work both attached and detached, even with the PlayStation 5 controller emulation, which is really neat. But things like that. Just want to make sure that you really know what you're getting into first before we start. Before we get started, I want to go over some hardware you're going to need. So here, you're going to need a physical keyboard. You're going to need a mouse, although I guess technically it's optional. You could use the trackpad on the Legion Go controller if you want. But need a mouse. I prefer using a mouse. And then you're going to need a physical connection to the device. So I have the mouse and keyboard connected via this USB hub to the Legion Go. So, but you're going to need that physical connection for the install. You'll also need a USB stick. I have an 8 GB stick here. You're going to need one large enough to fit the operating system, since we're going to turn this into an operating system installer USB. And I have a USB-C adapter just so I could you could either plug it in to the Legion Go, or in my case, I'm actually going to put it into the hub on the side and just plug it into the hub. But either way works. You can plug it in directly or use a hub. And finally, make sure you take out any micro SD cards right now before you proceed, because the micro SD card could interfere with installation. So it's better to just take it out if you have one in there. And with that, let's get started. So for the start of the process, we need to start downloading a bunch of files. So first you want to go to the Nobara website. And here on the Nobara website, go down and start downloading the actual ISO. So here is the Nobara Steam Deck ISO. We'll be doing Nobara 38 in this tutorial. But for when you're using this tutorial, maybe a newer version is out, but we're going to use 38. And then here we also want to get Balena Etcher. So let's download the portable version for Windows. Yeah, let's get the portable version. So let's just download that. And finally, you're going to need this resizer, partition resizer. You just download the free version and install it. In this case, I already have it installed, but let's just let the downloads go through and then continue from there. So as you can see, my downloads are finished. And I've actually already installed the resizer, so I have the resizer here already on the desktop, but make sure you go ahead and install it and then run it. And here what you're going to want to do is we're going to want to resize down your Windows partition so you can fit Linux onto your hard drive. So this is currently my Windows partition. It looks a little different because I'm on Windows 10 right now. So you could ignore like the name and stuff. You should look for your C drive, and you could resize it and just resize it down. So take this here and just resize it down to however much you want to give to Linux, right? Let's say in my case, I'll just because this is a demo video, I'll just lower Windows down to like 40 gigs, and the rest will go to Linux. So that 238 that's left will go to Linux. But let's just do that. And if you hit OK, what's going to happen is it's going to apply changes, and then it'll prompt you to reboot after we hit OK with everything. So it's going to need a reboot now. So let's just let it restart. And you can now see that it's going to do the resizing operation right now. So now it's just resizing the disk, and then afterwards it'll boot into Windows. So let's just give it a moment, and we should be back in Windows. And now we're back in Windows. So if we open up that resizer now and just take a look and just confirm that everything resized, we will see that now there should be a bunch of empty space. So now there's this unallocated space that will be used for Linux. And you could choose whatever sizes you want here. This is completely up to you on how much you want to give to one OS versus the other. But that's that. So now that this is done, next what we're going to do is we're going to install Balena Etcher. So here's that Balena Etcher file that we downloaded, and let's just run it. And what we're going to do is use this to create our bootable USB for the installer. So we just give it a moment and let it start up. There we go. So what you do is you flash from file, and you need to go to downloads and choose that ISO we downloaded. And here you plug in. This is where you plug in your USB stick into the device, and the USB will pop up when you click select target. Right now there's no targets because the USB is not in. If you plug it in, the target should show up. Now I've already got the installer on the USB, so I'm going to skip this step. But all you would need to do is select target, select the USB, then click flash, and then continue from there. And then once you're done, we can finally get started with the actual install process. So we can just shut down. One thing that maybe you would want to do is in Legion space, if you've remapped any of the back buttons, just turn the remappings off. But that's kind of optional. We could also do it later. Anyways, so shut down and then boot into the BIOS. So now we need to go into the BIOS, so hold the volume up button and press the power button. Something I would recommend is that you have the latest BIOS installed, which has a fix for TDP that is required for good TDP control on Linux. So if we go into the BIOS setup, we just click more settings. So first we're going to want to go into configuration, and we want to change the thermal policy from STT to STEMP. So what STT, what that does is that when you set TDP, custom TDP, STT will eventually override it with what it thinks is better. Whereas the STEMP policy should always respect the TDPs that you set. So if you want to do custom TDP control, you're going to want the STEMP mode enabled. But besides that, the other thing we need here is we need to disable secure boot. So if you go into security, if you scroll down, there's a secure boot option, and you want to change that from enabled to disabled. So change it to disabled, then you could exit, and then you just exit saving changes, and exit changes and leave. And now that that's done, we can keep going. Now that secure boot's disabled, now we need to plug in our USB. And you could either plug it in directly into your device with like a USB-C adapter, or if yours is already USB-C, you just plug it in directly in, like the bottom port. I'm just going to plug it into my hub over here, and let's just plug it in and then get into the BIOS again. So hold the volume up, press power, and from here, now that we're in the BIOS, we want to click boot menu this time, and click on the USB stick. And then here, it's going to be a little hard to see right now, but there's going to be an option for start Nobara. So click the top option, start Nobara, and hit enter on the keyboard. And then it will start booting into the installer. This will take a good amount of time. So I would say, go take a coffee break or something, and we'll be back for when it's fully loaded. All right, so now that the installer has loaded, there's a few things we're going to want to do. We're going to want to get rid of this little warning sign for the internet. But before we do that, for anyone that's using a trackpad, we'll need to configure it so that you could tap with the trackpad, because right now tapping doesn't actually click anywhere. So what we do is click on the little icon on the bottom left, and here, search for touchpad. With the keyboard, and then here, you're going to see a tap to click option. So click tap to click, and then hit apply. Then afterwards, your touchpad will let you click and close stuff. So this will, you'll need that for the proceed. But yeah, besides that, let's connect internet. So what I'm going to actually do is close this out. Hit yes. And here, connect your internet. Now that I connected Wi-Fi, one more thing is it's asking you to connect power in that little warning. So I'm just going to connect power really quick and make sure all the warnings are gone. Nice. Okay, so let's just go through the installer. And this part's actually very easy. So just choose like your time zone, your keyboard. And this is the part where this is also very easy. Just hit replace our partition. And remember that blank space? Just click the blank space. So this blank space will now be filled with the operating system. Easy. So then click next. And here you're going to want to type in like your username that you want to use. This is the username of the device, not your Steam username. And you can make this whatever you want. But I'm going to do Deck just because there's some Decky plugins that assume like it's a Steam Deck. So it uses the Deck username. And there's other small things like that. So I'm just going to use Deck as my username, but you could choose whatever you want. Like, honestly, you actually could. And here I'm just going to name this, like, I don't know, Deck Nobara PC. You can leave it alone, up to you. And then finally, you want to type in a password, but make sure you don't forget this password. Make sure you'll remember it, because recovering this one will be, it'll be annoying, because this is not like an online account. This is going to be your machine's password, right? So there's no like online backup or anything like that. So I'm just going to type in a password. Cool. And then let's just do that, hit next. And it just gives you a final summary of what's going to be installed. So it's going to leave your Windows partition, your yellow partition here. The Windows should still be there after the install. And the orange will be Nobara after the install. That's all you got to do. Click install. And now we wait. This will take a while, so go get another coffee or something if you already got one. And I will be back in a little bit. And the install is now complete. So what we just do is you click the restart now and click done, and it will restart your device. So for anyone that rebooted after the install, they might have booted into Windows. And if that happens, it's not a big deal. We could just fix that now. So there's two ways we could go about this. We could first go into the BIOS setup. And here, if you'll notice, there's two operating systems installed. There is Fedora, which is what Nobara is based on. So Fedora and then Windows. And for anyone that has Windows booting after the reboot, basically that means that Windows should be above Fedora, right? So this is just the boot order, and you need to change the boot order to whatever you want it to be. So you could leave Windows first if you want, do whatever you need to. You just press you could tap it and move up which one you want first or not. For the sake of this this video, I'm going to be having Linux booting first, but do whatever you prefer. And for those that prefer leaving Windows first, you go back into the BIOS and instead go into the boot menu. From here, you just tap the one that you want to boot into. So in this case, if you want to boot Windows, you just tap Windows. If you want to boot Linux, you just tap Linux with your finger, and it'll just boot straight into it. For this tutorial, obviously, I'm going to continue with the Linux side, so let's just tap that. From here, you're just going to go through the setup, log into your Steam account, and all that stuff. We're going to continue our setup in desktop mode, so just get through all the Steam setup, and I'll see you afterwards. And now we're in. So I've logged in, and all these button prompts are wrong, but it is what it is. So now we're in the Steam Deck mode. We'll just get to it. So go to desktop mode, and we'll go from there. Now that we're in desktop mode, it's going to prompt us for the update. So let's just hit yes to update, and let's type in that password you made during the initial install. You're going to need that password for anything that requires administrator privileges. So make sure, like I said, make sure you remember that password. Meanwhile, while this is doing updates, let's just configure the display and make things a little easier to read. This is zoomed in a lot. Let's move this down to like, whatever you prefer. I'll do 150 and see how it looks. Yeah, that looks okay. So just keep 150. And then we just close this out. And we'll just wait for updates to finish. So again, more waiting. So go get a third coffee if you want to get another coffee. And I'll be back. If you get a prompt for updating Flatpaks, you could just update. Just click yes. And then again, you're going to need the password once again. So just let it continue installing. After all the updates are done, it's going to prompt reboot. Just reboot, and then go back through the game mode and go back into desktop mode. So I will see you guys after the reboot. So now that everything is updated, let's actually start installing some stuff. So if we go to the website here, what we're going to do is first let's set up the controller. So we have in the links here, there's this Dualsense 5 PS emulator. and we're going to want this. And this one, this piece of software, the developer has been working on this a lot, and there's been a lot of work happening on it, so it's very, very new. So if you might encounter bugs and stuff because of how quickly it's changing, he only recently created this install script, literally like 12 hours ago. And he's been working on it a lot. But nonetheless, like this is rapidly changing. So by the time you see this video, things could have changed. But for now, so far, he's managed to do a great job here. But what we'll do is we're going to want this install script here. So let's just click the install script. And here, you could click this little download button. And that download button will download it. And that's our install script. Here, what we want to do is right-click it, go to Properties, go to Permissions, make it executable. Okay. And now that we made it executable, we need to go into Terminal. So we can see we're in the downloads directory, right? So now what we can just do is sudo /install.sh, which is our installer file, and just type in your password. So let's just type in the password from when you set up the device, right? So it's just going to install everything, and that should be it. Just in case, to make sure everything is working, I'm going to clear the terminal and do sudo systemctl status. And let's see, this should have disabled the handycon service. Oh, it is not disabled, so let us manually disable that, right? So sudo systemctl disable --now handycon.service. So now the handycon's disabled. If we check the status of it, it's now disabled, which is important because handycon conflicts with the PS5 emulator. So we've stopped handycon, and we now do sudo systemctl status rogue enemy service, and we can see it is up and running. Cool. So now if we do a reboot, let's just do a reboot now to check and make sure the controller is working as expected. So now we're rebooted, and it's already a good sign here. We can see the PlayStation symbols for the controller. Like down here, there's the PlayStation menu button. So if we click now, this should be the PlayStation button, the menu button. This should be quick access menu, so click this, and it seems to be showing up. Let's go into settings. We go into the controller. We see the DualSense Edge. There's this generic XPad, the Xbox controller, which is actually the original controller for this, but the program we installed takes all the inputs from that controller and pipes it through the PS5 controller. So if you tested the Xbox controller, nothing should happen. We test here, we can just check the back buttons are showing up. So you just click, back buttons are working. It's all working. Buttons should be working. This M2 button is the touchpad click. The trackpad is not hooked up yet, so it's just going to be stuck on that little dot in the top left. So the trackpad's not hooked up yet, so this software is still a work in progress. But just do a quick check and make sure your buttons are working. And if you want to also check the gyro, you could go back into the calibration and go into gyro. Check the gyro. Also, the joysticks by default might not be calibrated well, so you might just want to go in and change your dead zones around. But besides that, your controller should be set up now. So when we disabled handycon, it also disabled the power button suspend behavior, where you tap it for the suspend, it won't suspend. So we're going to fix that now. So let's just go back into desktop mode. And back on the same Legion Go website, Tricks website, there is also going to be this workaround here where it installs the, where is it? We need to install this power button fix. So this is what we're going to need. And for that, what you could do is you could go here, code, download the zip. And now that's in the downloads folder, so let's just open this up. We no longer need that old install script. I'm just going to delete it. And now let's just extract this here. So let's just extract here. And then in here, right click, open terminal here, and type in /, actually first chmod +x install.sh. And what this does is actually the exact same thing as what we did before when we right clicked it, properties, permissions, make it executable. But just in case, we're just going to just do it here. And then afterwards, type in /install.sh. And it's going to prompt you for your super user password. So let's just type that in. There you go. Now the install is complete. So if you go back into game mode and tap the power button now, it should actually suspend properly. So let's just check that really quick now. So back in the game mode, if you now tap the power button, it now does a proper actual suspend. So now that that's working, let's continue on. All right, so now let's just start setting up a few Decky plugins. So let's just go to GitHub Decky Loader. Let's just look it up, and there it is. From here, we're going to install Decky Loader, and you could follow the regular instructions here, all these instructions for install it. It's kind of a lot of work. I prefer the quick install, where it's just copy this line and paste it into terminal. Lots of terminal on Linux, as you've noticed, maybe. But basically copy, paste, oops. So for the paste, you do Control-Shift-V and hit enter. And type in our password again. That's it. Now that Decky loader is installed, we can actually start doing, there's this one setup script that I created here. I'll set up a lot of the rest of the stuff for you, so you don't need to manually do it. So what we'll want to do is just download the zip from this file, show downloads. Actually, rather than show downloads, let's click the folder to go into downloads. We don't need any of this old stuff anymore. Delete that. Let's extract this here. Go into Legion Go Tricks, and then here we're going to want to, again, this time make the Nobara setup executable. So properties, permissions, executable. In this case, it already is. Cool. So then we open terminal here, and then here we are going to want to do sudo /Nobara. Hang on, let's type in ls to see all the files. Oh, I named it LGO Nobara. Okay, so sudo /LGO Nobara setup. It's going to prompt you for your password, so type this in again. And I was going to start configuring everything, and that was very quick. So after this, what should have been installed is the sound fix. If we go back to the script, I could walk you through really quick. It's going to set up this headphone fix required for the sound fix. It installs the nested desktop file, installs the two plugins that you might want for this, which is TDP Control and RGB Control. And then this is the actual sound fix, and then afterwards it's done, so it completes. So that's the entire script. Now that we ran that script with a bunch of fixes, we should be able to do nested desktop, which lets us run desktop as an app in game mode. So for the just test, there's still a few more setup steps for to finish that. So let us go into terminal and just make sure the file's in the right place. So if we do ls/user/local/bin/steam OS, that's the desktop. It is there. So ls just lists files, but if you just specify a specific file name, it'll verify whether the file is there or not. So now that we know the file is there, we can now go into Steam. So let's just open Steam. Right click, let's just go into the store. And then from here, click the little button in the bottom left, add game, and the add non-Steam game. And in the add non-Steam game menu, go to browse. We're going to want to change this to all files. And then we need to navigate to that path. So it was /user/local/bin. And then in here, there's that Steam OS desktop. Yeah. Let's just hit that, hit open. And then if we hit add, then in our library, and if we search here, you should see nested desktop. Okay, so now that that's done, now we could reboot and just verify that all the changes that we made are there. So now that we're rebooted, let's just double check and make sure everything is here. So let's open the quick access menu. And here you can now see the Decky plugins are here and active, and then there's that TDP plugin. And here, let's change the TDP range. So on the Legion Go, 5 is the minimum in my opinion, and then the top should be 30 watt TDP. But you could change the limits to whatever you want. Just know that the hardware can only do so much. Sometimes they won't support certain TDPs and behave weirdly. This polling feature was previously needed for the Legion Go because of some weird BIOS behavior with the TDP. But if you've updated to the newest BIOS, and in BIOS you've updated that stamp mode and set enable that stamp mode, this polling should not be required anymore. So you can just ignore that feature. There's that, and now we have also this remapper. In this remapper, there is controller remapping, but you don't need it anymore because we have the PlayStation emulation, PlayStation controller emulation, but these plugins could now turn on and off the LED. And you could also here change it to a pattern or a pulse or whatever, change the brightness, and all of that. And what's really cool is that you could do per game profiles too. So you could have LEDs change per game. One thing though is that when you have the PlayStation 5 controller emulation and this plugin, sometimes they don't play well together and this plugin stops working. So just know that that's a bug that is currently being worked on and looked at. But for the time being now, you could also control the RGB from here as well, which is pretty cool. The per game thing I think is pretty neat as well. Besides that, we want to check the sound fix. So if we go into the settings and go into sound, audio, there's now going to be extra sound options here. These are the sound fix options, but one thing you should be aware of is that how the sound fix works is a little interesting. Interesting might be the right word. So the volume of your default controller, sound becomes the max volume for these fixed sound effects. And you might say, oh, then you should just leave this on the max, right? Because that way the other options have max sound. But as you just heard, it sometimes gets way too loud. It sounds unnaturally loud. So here, I would change this to what you find is reasonable. You can play around with it. Like me, I'd like to try it here, and then go to here. And this sounds much more reasonable to me. But just so you know, there's that behavior where this acts as like the central, like the main, this determines the limits of how high the volume could go, and then in the fixes now, that becomes this, like here. So that's just a thing to be aware of. This also applies to Bluetooth headphones as well. So when you attach Bluetooth headphones, these same effects will still be available, but you will have to go into your original Bluetooth headphones. They'll show up here as a device, and you should adjust it accordingly. And finally, we could also check the nested desktop functionality. So if we go into our non-stream library, non-Steam games, I'm not going to add Chrome now. You could add it again later. But here we just go to SteamOS nested desktop and hit play. And one thing is that sometimes the first time you try it, it freezes like this, but it's fine. You could just exit and go right back into it. It's fine. It usually takes like 2 tries, sometimes 3, but afterwards you can go right in. And now I just have this desktop, yet we are still in game mode, which is pretty neat. So we still have a quick access menu and overlay, but what's really, really the important thing here, I think, is that you can set up a dedicated control scheme. You can set up a dedicated desktop mode control scheme. So your controls could act how you want on the desktop only, and then you swap to a game, and it has a completely different controller profile. So I think that's really neat. Yeah, of course, this return to gaming mode won't work, and you can't run Steam within Steam. If you try to run the Steam client, it's not going to work because the game mode's already open. So it's a funny little things, but that's it for setting this up. So now all that's left is maybe some small bug fixes, and then I think we're good to go. So one bug on this device is that if we go into the quick access menu and go into the battery, you notice how it says it's full, but clearly if you look at the actual little battery icon, it is not full. And actually that icon is correct, but this is wrong. There is going to be a workaround that we'll set up now, where basically you can set the first indicator to always show the battery in the top left corner. So even if this is not working, the overlay, that level 1 indicator will always show the battery, so you'll always be able to tell what it is. So for that, let's just go back into desktop mode. And if we go back into our downloads, you click home, downloads, and then here, that tricks directory that we had before, there's also this script here, which sets up that battery overlay indicator for us. So if we go into here, open in terminal, let's just do a chmod +x, set up battery indicator overlay, and then we just do a / setup battery. And that's all you have to do. And if you want to know how this actually works, what this does is if we open it, it makes this folder, and then it just adds this file there. So if we go into that folder, which is home config mango HUD. So if we go back into the file directory /home /.config /mango HUD, right? Just created that and created this one file in there. And if we look at it, it has the contents of this file. And you can actually modify this to whatever you want. So this is actually a SteamOS feature. It's not specific to this operating system. So you can look up how to customize the mango HUD overlay. So right now, 1, it means turn it on, 0 means turn it off. So if you want to see FPS as well, you could turn it to 1 and then save it. So it's very customizable. You can play around with it, do whatever you want. But for now, we're just going to get that battery going. So if we now go back to the quick access menu, and now if we show that overlay, you can now see in the top left, you see that battery. So it's 77% right now. Whereas the Steam bug, where it still shows it's full, it's an odd bug, but at least there's a decent workaround for it. But yeah, that's it for the battery indicator. So one other bug you might run into, but it looks like it might have been fixed, but if you do run into it, this is just in case. But if you use a mouse or the trackpad while in game mode, the tone of the screen will change to orange. which is a weird bug. I think it might be fixed in the latest version of Nobara, but just in case you encounter that bug, I'm just going to show you how to quickly work around that. So I have the desktop open. Let's go into Home, Downloads, and there's still that tricks directory, and there is this script here, Disable Color Management. We open it up and look at it. All it does is that it goes into this directory, and then it adds this one file that disables Steam color management. So what we could do is actually just run it and just type in /disable color management and disable color management. So if we now go into that directory, which is, what was it? It's the home directory, which is home/deck, and then .config/ what was it? environment.d. We look here, there's that file that was created. You open it and you can inspect it. So now it turned off the Steam color management. But let's say you want to remove that fix, you just delete the file. That's all you have to do. And finally, let's say you decide that Linux isn't for you, and you decide you want to delete it and get Windows back fully on this device, right? So I'll just show you how to do that really quick. First, go into BIOS setup, and make sure your Windows is on top. So make sure it's the first boot option. This is going to be pretty important. But make sure it's the first boot option, click exit, and here you'll have to exit saving changes. So you just save changes and exit. So now that you're back in Windows, you could open that Resizer app from before that we used in the beginning of this tutorial. And what you could do here now is you could actually delete partition. So you could delete that partition. And then you also want to delete this partition. And now finally, this is the C drive on Windows. You just resize it and have it fill the rest of the space. Hit OK, hit apply, and that's all you need to do. Easy. So just hit that, hit OK. And now Linux is gone. Anyways, yeah, that's it for the dual boot setup video. If you want to do other things like set up emulators, like these emulated games here, etc., you could just use EmuDeck. The EmuDeck tool that's used for the Steam Deck works exactly the same. You could also use RetroDeck. So you could just use either of them and get emulation running. So there's plenty of tutorials out there already for those. So just do that. And besides that, you can see I customized my screen a little with a bunch of Decky plugins. So I'm using the CSS loader and added a bunch of stuff, etc. So have fun with it. That's it for me.